Let's continue on with our hypothesis test where we're looking at the relationship between stressful life events and anxiety. So we're in step 3, the first part of step 3, and we want to focus on the first thing that we do in step 3 for correlation, which is completing what is called the sum of cross products table. This is a new table to us. Let's go through what that looks like. This is the first thing that we want to do because we need some of those values for us to move on to the next part of step 3. So the sum of cross products, let's explain what is in each of these columns, and then we'll go step by step how to compute or complete this table. So the first column is similar to what we've seen in other tables that we've done. It's the participant identifier. So we have 8 participants. It's listed 1 through 8. Then we have our X values. At the bottom of that column is the mean of X. Then we have our Y column, and then we have our mean of Y. And then we move into something that's going to feel very familiar. We're going to compute deviations and squared deviations, just as we've done previously. So first, we focus on the deviations of X. So we're taking each X value and so it's X minus the mean of X for each participant. At the bottom, we're going to sum all of the deviations of X. That should sum to 0, not a big surprise, just as it's done every time that we've computed deviations, and this is no exception. You should expect it to be 0, but we want to double check, make sure that it does actually sum to 0 so that we make sure that we've got all the values correct. Then we'll do the same process for Y. So we're taking each value of Y, subtracting the mean of Y, and then sum those deviations, and that should also sum to 0. Then we'll move on to squared deviations. So we're focusing on the deviations of X. We'll square those. Those go into this column. And then we sum the squared deviations, and that'll give us the sum of squares of X. Then we'll do the same process. So for the deviations of Y, we'll square those. And then we sum those to get the sum of squares of Y. And then the last thing is this new term called sum of cross products. And what we're looking at is actually multiplying the values of the deviations in both of these columns for each participant. So that's the X minus MX and the Y times the Y minus MY. That's what that means. And then when we get those values, we sum those to get what is called SP, or the sum of cross products. So that's going to be what we'll focus on. So we're going to go through this step by step. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do to complete this table is we need to compute the mean of X and the mean of Y. So we'll add up all the values of X. This equals 24 divided by 8 participants, and this gives us a mean of X of 3. Then we'll do the same thing of Y. When we add up all the Y values, this gives us 56 divided by 8, and so the mean of Y is 7. Then we can move on to the deviations. So this is X minus the mean of X. So for our stressful events, participant 1 has a score of 2. So 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Then on to the next row. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 3 minus 3 is 0. 5 minus 3 is 2. 4 minus 3 is not negative 1, positive 1. See, that's why we double check. Positive 1. 5 minus 3 is 2. 3 minus 3 is 0. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. And so we're going to double check because, when you do it in your head, sometimes you got to double check. So negative 1 plus negative 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus negative 2 equals 0. Success. So that's what it should be. Now let's move on to the deviations of Y. So we're starting with participant 1. So it's 6 minus 7, which is negative 1. 4 minus 7, which is negative 3. 6 minus 7, negative 1. 9 minus 7 is 2. 10 minus 7 is 3. 8 minus 7 is 1. 7 minus 7 is 0. And then 6 minus 7 is negative 1. So let's add that up, make sure we got everything correct. So negative 1 plus negative 3 plus negative 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1 plus 0 plus negative 1 equals 0. All right, success. Now that we have our deviations, we can move on to squaring. So we'll focus on the deviations of x first. So -1 squared is 1. -2 squared is 4. 0 squared is 0. 2 squared is 4. 1 squared is 1. 2 squared is 4. 0 squared is 0. And then -2 squared is 4. So now let's add up those values. So 1 plus 4 plus 0 plus 4 plus 1 plus 4 plus 0 plus 4 is 18. So that's our sum of squares for x is 18. So then we'll focus on y. So -1 squared is 1, -3 squared is 9, -1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, and -1 squared is 1. So 1 plus 9 plus 1 plus 4 plus 9 plus 1 plus 1 gives us a sum of squares of y of 26. Okay, so now we're again going to focus on the last part of the table, and why I say again is we're going back to our deviations column. So we're really just multiplying. So -1 times -1 is 1. -2 times -3 is 6. 0 times -1 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. 0 times 0 is 0. -2 times -1 is 2. And now that we have all these cross products, we're going to sum them. So 1 plus 6 plus 4 plus 3. 1 plus 6 plus 0 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 0 plus 2 is 18. Oh. Okay, so now we have our completed table. Let's look at it in a nicer way. So here's our completed sum of cross products table. So in our next part of step 3, we're going to use some of these values to help us compute the Pearson correlation coefficient. And so that's where we're going to end this part of step 3. And the next video will continue on by computing R, both by hand and then also using a calculator so that we can show how to do both. Although by hand and calculator is probably the same thing if I really think about it. But anyways, we'll focus on that in our next video.